Thanks for tuning in to a brand new episode of With Just 15 Defeats. I'm Teekosey, and today I've got something a little bit special for you. We're going to be reviewing, evaluating and predicting the outcome of the big heavyweight battle between the Nordic Nightmare Robert Helenius and Dereck Chisora, which is a rematch of their fight that took place back in 2011. In doing so, I'm going to be assessing the merits of both fighters and running through a series of key issues that you may have about this fight. I'm also going to be providing you with the most in-depth assessment and insight into their previous fight with some fresh thoughts, which is the best benchmark for this fight. If you're new to this channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you for your continued support of Teekosey Boxing. If you have any questions on this fight or you want to start a debate on it, please hit me up in the comment section below and I will reply as soon as I have the time. I really hope that you enjoy this preview. So the fight's taking place on the 27th of May 2017, where there are a number of fight cards around the world. It's taking place in Helsinki, Finland, where Helenius has fought many times in his career and has fought at this actual arena many times recently. It's for the WBC silver heavyweight title, and I believe there is some form of mandatory opportunity available, but as we know, there are a lot of mandatory opportunities and mandatory challenges in the wings for many of the titles, so it seems unlikely that the winner of this will realistically be in line for anything. So let's move on and briefly talk about both fighters, because I want to get on and talk about the fight itself. So Dereck Chisora, he's a guy that I really like and I really admire, because he's really given it a go. He may not have had the natural talent, but he's grasped opportunities and really he has not shied away from fighting some real serious talent, like many fighters we see do. They just don't want to fight the big fights. They want to protect their records and just hope that they're going to get that one real big fight that will give them a title or whatever. Dereck Chisora's really gone in for it. Now, he currently has a record of 26-7 with 18 stoppages, which isn't too bad, and he's been a pro for approximately 10 years. He's 6'1", which is slightly small for the modern day heavyweight. Many heavyweights now are around about the 6'6", 6'8" in height. He's only about 6'1", and he comes in about 235, between 235 and 260. I would expect him to come into this fight around about the 245. Now, the story of Dereck Chisora starts with 14 wins on the bounce. He had a number of stoppage victories over domestic rivals before going into the ring, defending his undefeated record against another undefeated fighter in Tyson Fury. This was a fight that many people got quite excited about, despite them being quite young in their careers, and it was because both of them were very somewhat controversial and both spoke and taught quite a good game. Unfortunately, when it came to the fight, Chisora came in not in fantastic shape at all. However, he gave Tyson Fury a relatively tough fight, despite Fury winning on the cards relatively wide. At the time, my money was on Tyson Fury. I've been a supporter of Tyson Fury for many years and I've predicted big things for him. However, at that time, a lot of people were tipping Dereck Chisora to get the job done here. And likewise, many people have suggested that he did not take the fight seriously. And it was this fight that was the start of a real crazy 12 months for Dereck Chisora. As I say, he was defeated by Tyson Fury, and then somehow he managed to get a European title shot against Robert Helenius, which he lost on a split decision, and there'll be more on this fight in just a few minutes. 2 months later, bizarrely, he challenged the great Vitaly Klitschko for the WBC title. This was a comprehensive beatdown, and Vitaly won very wide and very handily. But what transpired afterwards was a press conference where there was an altercation between Dereck Chisora and David Haye. David Haye, in theory, had attended the press conference to try and engineer a fight against Vitaly, as he had recently been defeated by Wladimir. As I say, there was an altercation, there was a fight in the press conference, bottles were thrown, and this led to a fight between David Haye and Dereck Chisora happening, which I believe the whole press conference thing was completely manufactured. That's my own opinion. And David Haye went on to stop Chisora in quite an interesting fight, but he stopped in about 5 rounds. Chisora went on to try and rebuild his career with wins against decent opposition like Malik Scott, Gerber, Kevin Johnson, etc. And this led to a rematch with Tyson Fury. However, Chisora came in quite good shape, but this time we saw the emergence of Tyson Fury as a serious player. And it was a complete one-sided fight. Tyson Fury dominated it from the outset until it was stopped. And this was the fight where people woke up to what Tyson Fury was all about, really, because up until that moment, a lot of people thought Tyson Fury was a joke. I wasn't one of those people, as I've alluded to just a few moments ago, but many people spoke ill of Tyson Fury. They thought he was a joke, both in and out of the ring. They didn't think he was capable of anything. And then they saw how he handled Dereck Chisora so easily that they suddenly realised that Tyson Fury was a serious operator. And we know the rest of the Fury story. After that fight, many people thought that Dereck Chisora was finished. He was a journeyman and we're unlikely to see him in big fights. However, 2016, he had some very interesting fights. Unfortunately for Chisora, he lost both of these fights, but he fought against Kubrat Pulev early in the year, and he was defeated on points. And there was some poor judges scoring in that fight. Some judges had it very, very wide in favour of Kubrat Pulev. For me, I had it 7-5 in favour of Pulev. But Chisora worked extremely hard and he deserved to win a number of those rounds. He did not make it easy for Pulev. Then later on the year, he managed to get a domestic scrap against Dillian Whyte on the undercard of the Anthony Joshua IBF World Heavyweight title defense against Eric Molina. This, in my opinion, was made to save the show because the main event was such a poor mismatch. The Chisora-Whyte fight went on to be Fight of the Year. Very entertaining scrap. Very evenly contested. With Dillian Whyte winning on a split decision by 1 or 2 rounds here and there. In my opinion, I had it a draw. So Dereck Chisora is a very interesting fighter, and he fights in a style which is very uncommon, particularly in the heavyweight division. He fights in a very compact style, head down, hands up, and jabs almost exclusively to the body. Doesn't really look to punch to the head that often, but he does now and again. And he looks for that big overhand right, primarily because he's usually fighting against fighters that are considerably taller than him. He does have a very respectable engine, and he needs to in the style that he adopts. However, he really lacks power, which is a shame. And had he had a little bit more sting in his punches, I think he may have been able to really kind of put stop and possibly even win fights against the likes of Dillian Whyte, against Kubrat Pulev, and even Tyson Fury in the first fight. Unfortunately, the style that he has is not one that works very good in terms of the judges' scorecards or the boxing purists. It's a messy style that involves getting in the faces of oppositions. We saw in the first Helenius fight, the refereeing was pretty diabolical. He didn't really let any inside work. He was constantly warning Chisora on all kinds of things, and that can really detract from scoring for Chisora. And going back to the Pulev fight again, we saw a lot of rounds in favour of Pulev when realistically Chisora should have been winning those rounds. He should have been being rewarded for the effort he got in, for landing these punches. It doesn't matter if they're in close. If he's landing body shots, they're scoring shots. So Dereck Chisora's opponent, as we say, is Robert Helenius. He has a record of 24 wins with 1 defeat. Now, he's only got 15 knockouts in those 24 victories, which is a lot less than I assumed when I was thinking about this fight earlier today. He's also been a pro for 9 years, or nearly 10 years. I think he debuted in 2008. And he's a much bigger guy. He's 6'6", but he comes in around about the same weight. He's fought between 230 and around 265. Now, Helenius has for my money, a fairly average record and CV. Some of his best wins are against faded guys like Lamont Brewster, Sam Peter, some of these other guys that he has fought. In my opinion, his best victory is against Dereck Chisora. He took a few years out and he came back and he pushed over a few cans before going into the ring with Johann Duhaupas. Now, we know he is a durable guy. He's a credible opponent. He's been in the ring with the likes of Povetkin and Wilder. And I think the Helenius team were looking to build Helenius up for bigger and better fights, and they thought this would be a relatively easy one after Duhaupas had been previously stopped. However, this turned out to be quite an interesting and entertaining fight, which ultimately ended with Duhaupas stopping Helenius in devastating fashion. And Helenius, he is a tall guy and he fights very upright. However, he prefers to fight a very slow game at range. Now, he does have some power, but as we say, 15 in 24 isn't the most prolific knockout artist. And he does seem to struggle when he is pressured. So let's talk about this first fight, and I've got some assessment of it. Now, when I was considering making my preview for this fight, Robert Helenius versus Dereck Chisora, I tried to think back to the first fight. Now, as I say, 2011, that's 2017 now, so it isn't a recent fight. In my mind, I remember thinking that I thought that Chisora should have won it when I watched it live. So what I did was I started to snoop about online and just see what people who were expressing their opinions at the time thought. And I found a lot of people saying that this was a robbery, that Helenius's victory was a complete and utter robbery. And in fact, just a few moments ago, I was flicking on YouTube and trying to see some more videos, and I found a brief video by Richard Dwyer. Now, love Richard Dwyer's videos. I've been watching his videos for years and nothing against him, but he put out a brief video directly after the first Chisora Helenius fight, and he was clearly of the opinion that it was a robbery. He even says in the video that after a few rounds he stopped scoring it because he thought it was so wide. And I can clearly remember there were so many other guys that were of the same opinion. So I thought what I'd do is I would go back and I would re-watch the fight and just see whether it was as wide and as controversial and as much as a robbery as I remembered. So in order to really analyze this fight, I took some notes and I've compared it to the judges' scorecards and also the CompuBox stats of the fight. So let's quickly go through them. So the very first round, for me, I thought it was a wide Chisora round. He threw a lot of body shots, and realistically, Helenius, he only had one attack in the whole round. So for me, this was a very wide round for Dereck Chisora. However, all three judges went with Helenius. Now this is the interesting. CompuBox stats say that Helenius threw more punches that round, but Dereck Chisora landed more. Now moving on to the second round, Helenius started to get more joy, but for my money, Chisora was completely outworking him. And this is when we started to see the ref get involved. Now, I was unable to really choose who I felt deserved this, and it was a close round. However, all three judges again went with Helenius. The stats say that Helenius threw more, but they say that Dereck Chisora landed more. Moving into the third round, again, it's a very, very close round, which I could not split, but Helenius looked to be missing many of his punches. Two of the judges went with Helenius, whereas one went with Dereck Chisora. Again, the stats showed that Helenius threw more, but Chisora landed more. In fact, the stats show that Helenius landed 13 and Chisora 14, so a very, very close round. The fourth round, this was very, very lopsided in favour of Dereck Chisora. Helenius hardly landed anything in this round, and this is reflected in all three judges scoring it for Dereck Chisora, and the stats both in favour of Dereck Chisora. The fifth round's an interesting one because for the opening sector of the round, Helenius had Dereck Chisora in the corner, but he did not really attack. He was posing and posturing, but wasn't really throwing or landing anything, despite Chisora sitting in the corner. The second half of the round, Chisora went on to dominate. Now, so as I say, for me, Chisora wins that round in the fifth, but all three judges scored it in favour of Helenius. But the stats, again, they're both in favour of Dereck Chisora. The sixth round, for me, Dereck Chisora dominated it, but Helenius came back towards the end with some very good shots. So I scored it for Chisora, two of the judges scored it for Chisora, one scored it in favour of Helenius. Again, both the stats in favour of Chisora. Moving into the seventh round, the fight started to change, and this was a round that stood out for the reason that Chisora started to sit back. He actually started to box more conventionally, and this enabled Helenius to really start to push out that jab and score some shots. And because of that, I scored it in favour of Helenius, and so did two of the judges. One of the judges went with Chisora. This is interesting. The stats show that Helenius threw more, but once again, Chisora landed more punches. The eighth round, I'm giving it for Helenius. I think he worked well. It's probably one of his best rounds. But Chisora was working fairly hard. Now this is the interesting. I scored it in favour of Helenius. All three judges went in favour of Dereck Chisora, and so did both of the stats. The ninth round was fairly unmemorable, but for me, Dereck Chisora did just enough to edge that round. Two of the judges were in favour of Chisora, as were the stats. One judge, however, went in favour of Helenius. The 10th round was a huge round for Chisora. Helenius was visibly tired. He really struggled to do anything in that round. And two of the judges were in favour of Chisora. Both of the stats. However, one judge scored the round to Helenius, which is remarkable considering in round 10, he only landed 5 punches. 5 punches, and Chisora landed 24. How that could be any more lopsided, I do not know. So moving further forward into the 11th round, this actually went back in favour of Helenius. It was a very quiet round for Chisora. However, only one of the judges agreed with me, the one that scored the round for Helenius in the previous round. The other two went in favour of Chisora, as did the stats once again. Moving on to the last round, It was a fun action round. They both kind of went for it, but it was too close to really put it either way. I think they both put it out on the line. And I know, for me, it's a too close round. It's an even round. Two of the judges went in favour of Helenius. One went with Chisora. But once again, the stats showed that it was in favour of Dereck Chisora. So ultimately, for me, I scored 6 rounds for Chisora, 3 of which were very wide. I scored 3 rounds to Helenius and 3 close. Now, some people would say that's 6 all. Because of the home advantage, they would give the close round to Helenius, which is a very interesting point. And as we know, 2 judges went in favour of Helenius and 1 went in favour of Chisora. We saw all of the punch stats in favour of Chisora in terms of landed, and in terms of being thrown, Chisora won 8 rounds to 4. So in terms of the judging, I think it's realistically the first 3 rounds. And the story is that the judges clearly gave Helenius the edge because he was throwing so many punches, but he was landing at a very low percentage. We can see that the judges gave all the judges gave Helenius the first 2 rounds, and 2 of the 3 judges gave the 3rd round. And had these rounds been scored in favour of Chisora, there would have been a different outcome. And that is the story of that fight. Is it a robbery? I don't think so. It was so close. So moving forward to 2017, I actually think we're going to see more of the same. I think it's going to be a tough fight. I think it's going to be a long fight. But I think that Dereck Chisora is a much better fighter in 2017. I think he has perfected the art and the style that he has. And he's an incredibly tough opponent. He's not the best heavyweight in the division. He's not the most skillful. He doesn't have serious power. But he is a nightmare for a lot of opponents. And we saw Helenius struggle in that first fight. He struggled when Duhaupas put it on him, and he does not like it when it's in his face. I'm surprised that he has taken up this fight. The key to this fight will be the judging and also the referee. In the first fight, the referee did not have a great performance. And I have a feeling that this could be the big win that Dereck Chisora has been looking for many a year. And after seeing Helenius be knocked out recently, I just have a feeling, I know I've said that Chisora does not pack the serious power, but I just have that feeling that he's going to be able to land one of those overhand rights, and it may be enough to put Helenius on his backside. I've just checked the odds, and I don't know whether surprising is the right word, but they're in favour of Chisora. Now, Chisora is a 4-7 favourite for this fight, whereas Helenius is 11-8. And I don't know whether that's just a British bias on those odds or not. But what I do know is I think this is going to be a fun and interesting fight. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode of With Just 15 Defeats. If you've got any comments about this fight or my assessment, I would be pleased to hear from you in the comment section below. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you for your continued support of Teekosey Boxing. As I say, it really does mean a lot to me. And I really hope that you enjoy this fight, Helenius versus Chisora 2. It's going to be a really good fight. See you on the next episode.